Welcome back to the second episode of The Comic Shop Show. I'm your host, Chris Brenneman, and owner of what I think is the best comic shop in the metro Atlanta area, Infinite Realities, comics, games, and more. We've got a fantastic show lined up today. Jeanty, a 30-year veteran of the comic book industry, is on the show. Has drawn, well, I think he's drawn everything. The first time I saw his work was back in Green Lantern issue 91. It was the early 90s, and I was a huge Kyle Rayner fan. Still am. Kyle Rayner, best Green Lantern. Fight me. Anyway, Georges stepped in and did the pencils for Daryl Banks that issue, and I was an immediate fan of his work. He quickly became one of those guys who I'd buy a comic just by merit of his name being on the cover. Fun fact, Georges was probably the only comic book artist my mom knew by name. Ann Brenneman was not a comic book fan. She was happy I was into them, but she never had any interest in sitting down with one, let alone being obsessed with them. At least not until Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 8 came out with Georges on pencils. Mom was a huge fan of Buffy and was sad to see the show go. But when she found out that the official story was continuing as a comic book, guess who suddenly had a pull box next to mine at the comic shop? Guess who suddenly had a bagged and boarded comic collection of her own? So Georges is always going to have a special place in my heart for making my mom come to love this medium that I love so much. I had a blast talking to Georges, but I also feel the need to apologize to him for scheduling an in-person interview at the height of Atlanta rush hour traffic. I live 5 minutes away from the comic shop, so I think I sometimes forget exactly how nightmarish it is to drive anywhere in Atlanta between the hours of 3 p.m. and, I don't know, at this point, midnight? I think by midnight, Atlanta traffic finally starts to die down. Either way, Georges was a saint to brave all that traffic, to sit down with me face to face. It was a fun interview. He's a fun guy to talk to. And man, that voice, silky smooth. Folks, Georges Jeanty. How long did it take you to get over here?
What did I have to do? Oh, yeah, this is way too much. I'm sorry.
Yeah, going headphoneless.
I had to do Pleasant Hill, or was it Pleasantdale? What is this one over here?
I think that's Pleasantdale.
Pleasantdale.
Yeah.
I had to go Pleasantdale all the way from Buford to come over because, it was a whole red.
Atlanta's great.
285 was all red.
One day they'll finish it. One day they'll finish
Well,
everything.
see, I live in Norcross, so I have to cross Spaghetti Junction and do all that stuff.
That's gross.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I did this too.
That's why I say, 6 o'clock, ooh, that's people getting out at 5 o'clock there.
Well, that's why when you texted, I said, you know what, that's on me. Take your time. How you been doing, man?
I am well, still working, doing stuff, just trying to stay relevant.
I mean, I feel like you're
with all these
succeeding
kids
at it.
now.
All these kids these days.
Drawing on their computers. God.
That's so wild. So what have you been working on?
Well, as you well know, I did the Godzilla stuff for the summer that Marvel had, Godzilla versus the Marvel Universe, and in my case, Godzilla versus the Avengers. Mm-hmm. And I finished that. Did all of that Star Wars stuff, hopefully waiting for more. I am doing what is forthcoming now. I'm sure you know about it because I always have to explain these things because all of these miniseries that come out, people are like, oh, what's that? But the Dungeons of Doom.
Oh, yeah.
I'm doing they've got 4 artists, is my understanding, because I'm only doing my part of it. They've got 4 artists who are doing 5 pages apiece. So that's like one issue will have 4 artists, but they're 5 or 4 different stories. And I think we're doing 4 issues, 4 or 5 issues, I'm not sure, of 5 pages each. So my particular story, I'm assuming you've read into it, but the premise of the Dungeons of Doom is that obviously Doom has vacated his castle, and in the castle now these either mercenaries or people who are trying to recover anything they can, like AIM or Hydra or all of these other suspect groups, they're going in there looking through his dungeons,
right?
And not everything, it seems, has vacated. So they're finding artifacts and parallel worlds or stuff. I don't know. It's just a lot of stuff they're going to be looking for.
It's Doom's cast off stuff.
And I don't know where Doom is personally. If I don't know if that's some other continuity that I just haven't read up yet on. But yeah, to my knowledge, he's nowhere to be found.
Well, he recently took over the world.
Did he?
He did.
That Bastard never told me.
Well, I mean, he gave universal health care.
Oh, did he?
He gave free
In
education.
Latveria?
He gave everybody free education,
Okay.
universal health care. What a bastard he was.
Well, he's a monarch.
So how do you get tapped to do a story like that?
Really, it's so uninteresting because it's I hate to say to people who want to get into this business, a lot of it is who you know.
Sure.
I mean, yes, it's how good you are too, and the fact that you are responsible. But a lot of these gigs that I get are either from an editor I worked with or an assistant editor I worked with, and they said, "Oh, hey, by the way, I've got this and I've got these few pages if you're interested," type of a thing. So this gig I've got from an assistant editor, I think, was on some of the Star Wars stuff, and they just said, "Hey, I need an artist. If you're interested, I can give you this Dungeons of Doom 5-pager or miniseries." So it's like that. This business is so small still. A lot of people think coming into it, oh, well, you're an artist, and for some reason they think you're a celebrity, and you're really not.
I call it comic book famous.
Well, yeah. I only say that isn't the case only because the relationships you foster in this business are the relationships that will come back at you. And if, let's say, you have an agent or you have a representative or something else other than what you're doing yourself, that relationship is now being fostered by that person and not necessarily by you. So when something like this happens, that editor, hypothetically, isn't necessarily thinking of you. They're thinking of either that person who represents you or the person they worked with before. So I always tell people, if you can personally foster a relationship with any of your editors, do that, because these are the people who give you jobs, and they are the most obscure. It's the most obscure title in the credits because nobody knows what an editor does. But when you get into it, that's what you realize: the editor is the most important person there.
That they do the hiring and the firing.
They do, yeah. They assign the work and do all that. They make sure your check goes through and you get paid and all that stuff. So it's very important.
So what is a good editor like?
A good editor, I would tell you, is worth his weight in gold. I don't know that, funny enough, I don't know that there are so many editors in the business nowadays. It used to be the editor was the guy. I've had editors, like I worked way back in the day, back in 2000 sometime, on Green Lantern stuff. I did a bunch of Green Lantern. I actually started on Green Lantern at DC. And
that was the first time I ever saw your work.
Oh, yeah? Oh, okay.
Kyle Rayner cover.
Kyle Rayner? Yeah,
Desaad trying to get his ring off.
Yeah, I was, funny enough, and I only got that, and here's another good way of proving my point. I only got that gig because Daryl Banks, who was the regular artist on Green Lantern, he couldn't, obviously an artist eventually will get caught up or cannot finish or cannot do something. So as an editor, you have to plan out, because this is still a deadline-oriented business. And knowing that your regular artist will not be able to finish his deadline for the issue that's 3 months ahead, you then as an editor say, okay, I have to find somebody to fill in for that book and let him work on that now, so that there is no gap in that 3 months ahead issue that's going to come out, because that issue will come out. And if it doesn't, again, this is a money-based, as anything is, you're not making money. If you can't, as a comic shop retailer, you know that.
Bill's got to get paid.
Well, the companies hate to have a book returnable, because that means they're not making as much money as they thought they were. So anything they can do on time, they will sacrifice something else to make sure they can get that book done. And that's why usually a fill-in artist is needed. And that's where I came in. The gentleman writing the book at the time was Ron Mars.
Right.
And like I said, who you know. I was in a studio with Dave Johnson, who was working on, I believe it was Superman, the Red Son. He was working on Superman Red Son, and him and Ron were friends, and they would talk often. And as I was in the studio, Dave was always like, well, if I hear anything or if I talk to anybody, I'll definitely, throw your name in there. And he mentioned it to Ron. And of course, Ron himself couldn't get me the job. The writer couldn't get me the job. It is an editor's job to assign that sort of thing. But Ron then took it to his editor, who, I can't remember who the editor was.
Was that Kevin Dooley still?
I believe it was Kevin
Yeah.
Dooley because I worked with him on another project. I worked with him on that other Green Lantern 3D project.
I remember that,
one.
yeah.
And Kevin was great, and that's sort of a long way around to come back to saying an editor is worth his weight. Kevin loved Green Lantern, and I was a Marvel fan. So growing up, I only read Marvel. I knew, and of Superman, Batman.
You're aware.
You're aware of them by pop culture, if nothing else. But I wasn't familiar as much with it. And Kevin was in there going, you just ask me anything. And when Ron would write a script, I would say, well, because of course, Green Lantern Corps, they have all of these damn Green Lanterns.
Yeah.
And I was like, especially for the 3D, because in the 3D, they were almost all of the Green Lantern Corps were involved. And legit, I asked Kev, look, hey, I'll do whatever you want, but I am not as familiar with these characters. And we would discuss things, and in certain scenes, I would ask, "Hey, would this look better, or would that look better?" And it would sometimes spark an idea. Say, "Oh my God, there was an issue 10 years ago where this part would look so good in that. Let me get your reference, and then you can put that in there." And as a result, he made that book look way better than I would have ever done because I had no foreknowledge of the concept. And so that, in a sense, is where an editor is really, really good. Yes, an editor's job is to make sure the trains run on time. You meet your deadlines, it gets published. An editor is wrangling a writer, an artist, an inker, well, maybe not an inker anymore, a letterer, and a colorist. So on an average, 5 people he's wrangling on a monthly basis, and that's his job that he has to do. And he very seldom has just one book. Most editors at that time had maybe 5 books. I hate to think how many books an editor might have now, but then that's why they also had an assistant editor to help them out. Mm-hmm. So in doing so, an editor who understood the project, who understood the concept, I always felt was so much more valued than just, hey, I need that done by Friday or anything like that. Because there were times where Kevin and I would just talk about Green Lantern. And not necessarily it would maybe have sparked from work, but just at the end of the day, it's like, hey, I love what you did here, or this page looks so good, or, whatever. And it would lead into something else. And I felt good that, he was really into it. Tom Brevoort, who's still over at Marvel, was like that with the Fantastic Four. And it was always a pleasure to talk to him. Funny enough, I never worked with him on Fantastic Four, but I did some peripheral jobs with him, and he was very much a fan. So it was like you and I sitting here saying how much we might have loved Frank Miller's Daredevil or something like
just
that.
Just nerding out together.
Just nerding out in the sense that all of this is progressive and it is going somewhere, but we're taking the long way round.
That's really cool. So it sounds like a good editor gets you excited for the project.
It used to be. Yeah, I don't know what it's like now. I've made friends with a lot of editors, and this is not to disparage any of the editors who are working now. Obviously there are so many. I only work with 1 or 2 here and there, but I do find that seems their job now more so because it's such a corporate thing, is basically to get the trains running on time and not necessarily stopping at a station and taking in the sights or anything like that. It's just going, okay, let's go. Deadline here, there. And, every month you just go.
I'll tell you, it's wild. And as a fan, just watching from the outside how much it's changed. Because I do remember back when you would know who the editors were. Marvel even did Assistant Editors Month.
Right, they would put that joke. Yeah.
Yeah, they were as much personalities as the writers.
Well, because they would do that because there was every year there was some sort of a meeting where all the editors actually, I want to say it was in LA, but I could be wrong, especially with Marvel. I don't know what it was like at DC. But basically all the editors would vacation or have a summit, is I think what they had called it. But it really was just a chance to get away. So for that, they weren't gone for a month, but they were gone for as much of a time that it would have interfered with that particular book that they would have been doing at that time. So I think in a very cheeky Marvel maniac type of a way, they came up with Assistant Editors Month, where the assistant editors are coming in, and of course they made it into a big farce of something.
But that was fun. You don't see stuff like that anymore.
No, not nowadays.
I don't know that I can name many editors anymore.
Well, remember too, that was back in the day when books were ongoing. Now you've just got a 4, 5, 6 issue limited series, and the editor knows when it's done. Like, well, if I want to take some time off, I'll take it when after the miniseries is done or something like that. With these books, like Captain America or Fantastic Four, or Superman, whatever, you're on issue 200, 300, and you're like, okay, we've got to make it to 350 or something, and I will be gone this month, so you have to make sure the train is running on time for that particular month that I'm gone.
What year's your first published work?
I started with the independent books, and technically I started in 95.
Okay.
I started in 95. I personally feel, because it's so weird, the synergy that goes on around certain times. Of course, I was trying, I think I got serious in 92 to say, yes, I want to do comics. I want to do comics.
And how old were you when you got serious?
Do we have to say?
No, we don't have to say.
I was in my early 20s. No, I was in my early 20s at that time. And it was a thing where I was serious. And at that time, too, we were still having to send submissions. And at that time, it was very much a formula that they would tell you, do 5 pages of submissions and send those out. They had a submissions editor over at DC. They had a submissions editor at Marvel. And you would send them copies and then hopefully get a response and things like that. And in theory, if you didn't, I would get a lot of rejections. And it is what I'm always reminded of Stephen King getting all of these rejection letters when he was first starting out, which you're going, I can't imagine that. And that he would post it on his wall.
Yeah, he had a bulletin board for him.
Yeah, put it, and I basically had I didn't put it on my wall, but I basically had the same thing. I had rejections from Marvel, from DC, from Eclipse, from, a bunch of First Comics, I think I tried out with. The encouraging thing, though, because I was trying to do 5 pages every 6 months, because at that time, you've got another job. You have something else because this isn't your job yet. And you need to find something to support yourself. So I could only really draw on the weekends or do that sort of thing. And I was very serious about what I was doing. So I just said, all right, every time I finish a submission, like 5 pages, I'll do another 5 pages, because in theory, I am getting better. And the last 5 pages are not as good as the future 5 pages that I'm going to be doing, and so forth. So I probably, funny, I still have it somewhere in my house, but I've got submissions like that, probably totaling a whole book. I've got maybe 20, 30 pages of 5-page submissions done in maybe 6-month increments.
You kept all of those.
I mean, as an artist,
That's great.
You just put it in, or your mother kept it for you.
Yeah,
and you just
she got that banker's box in the closet.
So 95, and I tell people that because I tell them to say, I was trying to do comic books, and it took me 3 years before somebody really said yes. So everybody thinks, well, I think I'll do this, and they'll jump in it, and it's almost like a movie where that time lapse in the film, just kind of goes to the point where, he's got a job already.
And now here he is.
And when in reality, it's, you try. And then even so, because after I got a gig, there were so many false starts. I thought I'd gotten something at Defiant, and I thought that was going to be ongoing, and I was going to work in the comic, and then it collapsed. And Techno Comics,
I remember Techno.
I got something at Techno Comics, and I thought, oh, great, I'm on my way, yes. And then that fell apart, and it was another 6 months or so before I got anything else. It wasn't until Caliber Comics, who was already printing things, as you well know. They started off the Crow series. They're probably the most famous for the Crow series. They were, and this was again the '90s, and this was right around the time when the Image Boys divested from Marvel and said, no, we're going to do our own thing, and we're going to make our own comics, and we're going to call it Image Comics, and we're going to do this. Anybody who's seen my stuff knows it looks nothing like Image, and it looked nothing like that even more back then. And this was, like I said, 95 or so, that I thought, oh my God, this is all the rage, and my stuff looks nothing like this. I will never draw comics in my life. I thought, at best, the only thing I'll do is Vertigo books, because they were so different in their look.
Very different.
I thought that was the only thing. I'm like, I'll never do superheroes in my life, because I don't draw like Image, and I can probably do an issue of Swamp Thing here and there, but man, it was distressing. But the cool thing before I came to the majors was that Caliber was aware of this whole superhero thing because if back in the day, Caliber never printed superhero comics. They printed a lot of novelizations to comics. They printed a lot of music to comics, and all of this more of the avant-garde, like The Crow. I mean, The Crow, I don't know if you'd consider The Crow a superhero, but you understand his... I guess an anti-hero or whatever stuff like that is what they were printing. And, of course, Marvel wasn't doing that because their only claim at that point would have probably been a Wolverine, and Wolverine was taking off to a point where that was it. We have our Wolverine, and everybody else is publishing something different. But that term anti-hero was really being done in the independent market for a while, because that was also around the time when the Bad Girl thing was really starting to take hit. Where now you had a really hot girl who was an anti-hero, and she was cool and wore very little, but she could kick ass night and day.
Remember Lady Death?
Lady
everywhere.
Death? Oh my God, there was all, and I probably had my hands on all of that stuff around that time, all of the independent.
Oh, wow.
Lady Death. I'd say that to say from Caliber, which got into the superhero thing. They started publishing superheroes, and that was my first publication. But they only lasted, or my only association with them lasted maybe 2 to 3 issues. So again, I'm sitting there going, "Oh my God, cool! I made it." They didn't go out of business. It was just that boom imploded, and they didn't see the numbers they wanted to see when they were publishing. It wasn't until I then moved over to London Night Studios, which had Razor and Strike and Poison and all these heavy metal band names, that I started to really feel like, okay, now I think I'm making it in this business. Because in that meantime, there was my work at Defiant, and there was work at Techno. But again, all of these things were such start stops. You know, just when you think you made it, something happens, and it was never, thankfully, it was never me, or maybe I was more of a harbinger because everybody I worked with went out of business.
Like, oh, here comes George's. Everybody start polishing the resume.
And mind you, it's almost like, you know, you saying to yourself, how come I never have a girlfriend? You know, all the relationships I've ever been in ended awfully. You start thinking, well, what's the common denominator here? I'm the common denominator, but in truth, something like, it's obviously, to consider myself the center of all that, it's much too ego. Defiant went out of business essentially because Marvel was after Jim Shooter. They didn't want him publishing comics. And Jim had published this one book, I can't remember the name, but it was very close to a book, Strike, something, maybe Strike or something. So Marvel took Shooter to court, essentially not caring whether or not they won, because Shooter actually did win. Once a judge did look at the 2 titles, he said, no, these are not the same. This case is frivolous, and he
they
threw
just
it out.
wanted him off the board.
They wanted him off. But in doing so, you know, Shooter's a smaller company back then. Defiant is a smaller company. All the money that they had went into defending themselves in court against Marvel, who, of course, had deeper pockets than they did. And while they were okay with the verdict, it essentially bankrupted the company. And that was at the time I had just come in. And, of course, it was the title I was doing was called something Dogs of War. And I think it went 4 issues. I think I drew the 5th issue, which never saw print. But it was one of those things. Everything I worked for had that something happened to them.
So what made you keep going back to the grind? I mean, I feel like a lot of people would have said, "That's it. I'm done."
I don't know, hubris. You know, when you're in your early 20s, you don't care because you're still sitting around thinking, "I'll do this for free. I just want to draw comics." You just want to draw. And honestly, I very seldom today meet people who have that same ideology. And I say that ideology and not something else because I meet a lot of people who want to draw covers. I meet a lot of people who just want to do prints. I meet a lot of people who want to do everything. I like to use food analogies. Everybody wants to do wants the dessert. Nobody wants to do the meat and potatoes.
Right.
The interiors, that 20 pages in between the cover and the back cover.
The grind.
That is the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. At the end of the day, if we don't have that in between, all we're doing is publishing pretty covers. You know, we're not publishing comics. We're not publishing stories. And very early on, And it's only because of how I was affected reading comics. I wanted to be effective, but I also wanted to affect somebody reading comics. And to me, while a cover is great, and you can be Neil Adams, you can be Michael Golden, and I have myself ripped out a cover just because it looked so good and kept it to the side. But at the end of the day, it's what's inside of that book. And if you're not reading it, if you're not affected by it, I don't know why you're doing this. And sadly, so much today, and I still do a bunch of shows, I meet so many people who, and I didn't even know it was a term, but they're like, no, I just want to be a cover artist. And I always thought, well, I didn't know that was an actual term, because covers were a luxury. They weren't the thing you did solely. I mean, maybe the one exceptions like a Jim Starlin or even Frank Miller, who got to a point where he didn't want to do interiors, you would do a cover, sure, but essentially, a cover, the book was the meat and potato. This is your food. This is what's going to sustain you every month. And I find a lot of people just don't want to do that anymore.
I feel like that's short-sighted, because as a retailer, cover artists, I can name 2 or 3 that are consistent cover artists. But every week there's just somebody that I've never heard of and I'll never hear of again, but they did their cover but have never done an interior.
Yep.
I don't think that you're doing yourself a service.
And those guys, and this is me just speculating, so I have no firm grasp on the facts of all of this. A lot of those guys I just see, and all they really want to do, because, and it is smart business, I will say. If they've got a cover, a variant cover, let's say, The Mandalorian, which was a book that I did. There were, for issue 1, I don't know, there were maybe 15, 20 covers
there were a
for
lot.
Issue 1?
Yeah.
So for that, and funny enough, whenever I still sign Mandalorian books, and I'll see a cover I've never seen before. I did the book interiors, but I will come across every now and again a cover that, I had no clue that this was the case. And like you said, who is this guy? Yeah, it's really good, but what does this guy do? And it's so sad to see that, because I'll see somebody who is really good and think, God, how sad this is that he doesn't do the interiors. You look at a Michael Golden, and I use Michael because he was one of those guys. He never really did monthly as much. He did do the Micronauts, yes, but monthly was never necessarily his thing. And he did a bunch of covers like Kirby and a bunch of other artists. So I'm using that as a relation, but I always looked at his work, and you look at it going, God, if this guy could do the interiors, this is a godsend. Because the cover was just something you saw to entice you to come in, and it wasn't just
it was the billboard.
Yeah, it wasn't just okay. Because even I do this today. I hate to say it, I'm such a victim of this. I'll look at something, oh, this is a great cover. I'll open that book, and you're like, to me, these feel like just sketches or roughs, or somebody just kind of went in there and did something real quick so that they could justify these 20, 22 pages of a book. And I'm like, wow, I don't know how this book would get sold personally.
Right.
Because once you look at the cover, and the cover's nice, but once you get past that cover and you're sitting down, whether you're sitting on the toilet or your favorite easy chair to read, I'm just not interested,
Well, we put together, speaking of hubris, a retailer's guide to selling your independent comic to comic shops recently, because everybody,
really?
Everybody brings in their self-published comics
from people who aren't
Yeah,
established.
people who aren't established, and I think that's the coolest thing. Like you have sat down and you've done it.
Yes. Because we've all done. Well, I don't know you, but and anybody who was an artist back in high school, junior high, wherever you were, we all did it. I was so proud. I did in 1980. My uncle made me a bet. He said, if you can give me a comic book by the end of 1980, by New Year's, I don't know, I'll give you $40 or something. I'll give you $20. Whatever at the time, it seemed like a large
1980
amount of
money, though.
And I did, and I penciled it. I inked it with a ballpoint pen. I still have it. This is the only reason I know that. And I had a couple of markers around, so you'll see that I colored it a little bit here and there. But I look at it with a sense of odd pride, because legitimately there is a story. There is something I was trying to say. Obviously, it was probably aping every other comic I had read up until that time, but it was there, and it was mine, and it was something that I did. And yeah, even to this day, I'm so proud of all that stuff because there was no other motivation. I mean, pleasing my uncle, yes, but
$40.
no other. And well, yeah, the money was as inconsequential, but just the fact that I could say, "Wow, I did this."
But you put the work in, and one thing we're always telling people that bring their self-published is like you got to give service to the story.
Yeah. Well, the story and.
And I mean that with pencils as well. Like they've put all this into their writing, but they haven't put anything into like the actual art of sequential.
Right. Yeah, because I'm an artist and I draw, but I will be the first one to say story is everything. I would much rather read a story from Alan Moore and a so-so artist than read a story from a so-so writer and a really good artist.
But when you get an Alan Moore with a really good artist,
oh my God, you get Swamp Thing. That's what you get. Yeah, you get Miracle Man.
Watchmen.
Oh my God, you get Watchmen. A lot of people think, oh, but it's just funny books. It's just, it's kid stuff. It's like, no, I would put something like Watchmen or Swamp Thing or, anything that, even what Miller was doing in Daredevil at the time, I would put that up against any media that you were being affected by at the time, whether you were reading a novel or watching a movie or anything else. Those stories were so good and so engaging. I knew nothing about Norse mythology. I did not like Thor one bit until Walt Simonson started doing it. And in reading it, I realized, oh my God, I'm actually getting an education here as well. I'm not just learning and enjoying this. I'm actually learning this everybody knows about Greek mythology, hypothetically, but I knew nothing about Norse mythology, and I was loving this book as it was coming out. I still don't consider Thor to be a favorite character of mine, but while he was doing it at that time, oh, man, I was so engaged.
But that run is one of my favorites of all time, and I will return to it.
For sure.
So what got you? What hooked you? I know Uncle gave you $40 in 80. What was he seeing you read? What was pulling you into comics?
It wasn't even that, because he was one of those guys. I'd only see him on special occasions, somebody's birthday or a holiday or something like that. So it was me. I guess just me. I was the oldest at that time. I was the oldest of two kids. And my mother was a single working mother, so obviously you have a lot of time on your own because usually you're a latchkey kid, which is a term they don't say anymore. But she was off at work, so I had to entertain myself. And when you're a kid, 5, 7, 8 years old, however, what better thing to do than read? Obviously, it wasn't just comics. I was in the television, of course, and anytime I could go see a movie, and it's funny, the things our parents did that we would never do today.
Ever. There are things my parents did that I could not think of replicating with mine.
What was it, 77? Because, when Star Wars had come out, it was 77. I hate to date myself, but I was probably 8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
My mom got so fed up with me at some point, she just dropped me off at the theater and said, okay, I'll be back in a few hours. I could never see doing that to a kid
Luke Skywalker babysitting you today.
Mind you, I was in heaven the whole time. But, can you think of leaving your kid at a place where they still had a smoking section?
I mean, I can think of it, but I can't commit to it.
I could. I look at it now because I have nieces. I don't have any kids, but I do have nieces and nephews. And just to say, you're leaving them at the theater because God knows what could happen. You just never know.
I'm leaving you in this dark room.
Exactly.
Filled with strangers.
And, it's very, very suspect. So yeah, that was what got me started, and just the whole fantasy of it all. I had action figures. I had the $6 Million Man, the Big Jim, and some of the G.I. Joes at the time. And, you just create things. And comics were, my haven at that time, because I grew up in Miami. Really where you could get comics was a 7-Eleven. And they sold, they sold comics. Obviously, they sold a bunch of stuff, but they sold comics and they had Slurpees. And at that time, I remember very vividly, Marvel was doing a thing with them where you could get a Slurpee Marvel cup. And,
I've got a few of them behind the counter.
Sure, if they haven't disintegrated already, because that was cheap plastic.
They're close.
And I really remember for $1, I could get 2 to 3 comics and a Slurpee. And that was heaven for me. And after school, whenever I could get $1, I would go in and just buy whatever. Once they went up to 30 cents, comics did, I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore because now it's more than $1 here. So
were you an X-Men guy, Avengers, Fantastic
Funny
Four?
enough, I was never an X-Men guy. I wasn't an X-Men guy until high school, and I never read I started reading the X-Men when Paul Smith got on board.
That's a good run.
That's a good
That's
run,
a great
but I
run.
missed all of the John Byrne stuff. And I really wasn't on board until the Wolverine miniseries with Frank Miller and Chris Claremont. And once I got that, I was like, okay, if there was any question about what I wanted to do, this quelled it because I was so engaged with the story. Mind you, I didn't know. I mean, I knew about Wolverine, and of course, the way continuity was, they had it planned very well because the events in the Uncanny X-Men led through the Wolverine event because in the comics, he was missing when the miniseries was coming out. And when his miniseries ended, of course, it ended with him being engaged.
Right.
That issue of the Uncanny X-Men was where the invitation came to the X-Men saying, you guys are all invited to my wedding here. So all of that continuity coming out the way it was, I just said, wow, I've been underestimating these X-Men. And it wasn't until in high school, a friend of mine, and you will never hear anybody, well, because you don't have to do this anymore because you've got nothing but collections. A friend of mine, we were talking about the X-Men and I was telling him, oh, well, yeah, I only really, Paul Smith and Frank Miller and all this. And he's like, oh my God, you've never read the John Byrne stuff? No, dude, you have to read that. And I'm like, how many issues? I don't know, they're like 20 or so. There's a bunch of them. It's so good though. And I was like, yeah, all right, maybe I'll get to it sometime. He's like, no, he went the next day. He brought me his collection.
This is a true friend.
And that's just it. He really wasn't. He was just a guy who understood. No, I know you should be reading this because when you read this, you will be converted. You will have drank the Kool-Aid and you will love this forever and ever. And true to form, he gave it to me, and because I would never do that now. I would say no because I don't know how you handle books, and it's all in plastic, and it's nice and pristine.
Yeah, here's Marvel Unlimited. Go do that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, nowadays, right, you can just give him a collection.
Can't do that then.
Couldn't do that.
I would
then
not have
because,
loaned my comics out.
Yeah,
that guy's a better man than me.
He was. He wasn't so much a collector. He was more of a reader.
Sure.
And there's a big difference,
Yes, there
too,
is.
because you don't have readers anymore. You have collectors who read. And the people who just read comics seem to be extinct because I do that. I'll pick up a book, and then after I've read it, I just sort of put it down. And if somebody said they liked it, I have been places a lot of me, because I work from home, I try to go out to eat because it kills the monotony of working at home, sleeping at home, staying at home.
The same four walls.
Same four walls every day. So I'll go out for lunch, but I'll take a book or something to read with me. And very often, depending on where I am, if I've finished the book, I'll leave it there. Like I'll leave it if I've seen they have magazines or other periodicals just laying around. I'll just kind of leave the book, and
That's
hopefully
really cool.
somebody else will pick it up and do whatever. So my collection, not to say I'm not a collector because I am, would extend to something specific like, oh yeah, I'm collecting the Fantastic Four. So many.
That's how I
issues here.
collect now. Yeah, it's a very specific thing.
Right. So anything fun to read, and if it is something I do want to keep, sure, I'll keep it. But like everybody does now, they'll just get the trade when it comes out because it's all limited. Nothing is ongoing. There is no continuity anymore. It's just that one story. And I think that is such a disservice. I always thought comic books were soap operas, very much like the TV shows. Comic books were ongoing. And perfect example is the X-Men stuff. Claremont, to his credit, man, he understood the assignment, essentially. This is a soap opera. These are things I have to get people to come back every month. I'm not just doing this great 5 issues, or I'm not just telling the origin of Wolverine in these 2 issues. I am doing this for the long haul. And every one of my characters, and at that time, X-Men were 7, 8 characters as a group. Everybody has to have an arc. There has to be something going on with everybody there. And I hand it to them because nowadays I don't think a writer could do that sort of thing because they're so, and this is where I think, because everyone says, but aren't you happy that movies are starting to be made from comics? I was like, yes, I am, but it seems like we're trying to make the comics the movies now, and that's just not the case.
And I can tell you from a retail perspective, there's no one-to-one correlation. Just because you try to make the comic emulate the movie, it doesn't bring the movie viewers in.
No. And right, you don't get the same viewership. Very much like the novel and the movie. You know, I can say I enjoyed the novel of The Exorcist, but the movie of The Exorcist was such a different beast that it took it into a different direction, sure, but the novelization of, or the novel of that is a special thing unto itself.
Yeah.
You know, you could have read Jaws, you know, Peter Benchley's novel, and just said, okay, I'm good with this. Sure, when you see the movie, okay, this is different, some things aren't the same. But just that, and that world is in of itself. And I've always appreciated that. And I never thought the two had to meld. I didn't understand why we were trying to make comics look like movies. Because we're doing a disservice. Comics look like comics.
They look like comics.
Nothing else looks like a comic book. You know, no novel, no movie, nothing else can do what we do. Why are we trying to weed that process out? And to this day, I just don't get it. Because I will read a script. Some writers I'll read where, my God, they'll do something in 4 pages. Like, you know, I don't know, Steve Rogers gets up and he's scratching his head, and you know you see Band-Aids on his forehead and about his face, and he's you know rubbing his jaw, and he's getting up and then going to the bathroom and then leaving his flat at some point, and they're taking and doing that in 4 or 5 pages. You could do this in 1 page.
Yeah.
You could have done all this in 1 page and be effective. And yet you're doing this in 5 pages because, and God help me, I hear this term so much. They say, no, I want to be cinematic. And that, you know, it's one of those things like, I applaud you because I kind of know where you're coming from, but I can't support you because this is not the same medium.
Do you talk to the writer about that when you get that script? Will you have that conversation?
Yes is the answer. Mm-hmm. Yes. But the problem there is many times the script is already written. So if it's already written, and in many cases, the writer has written that script months ago. So he's been paid. Marvel has accepted, Marvel, DC, whoever. They've accepted it. They have put it through the process of saying, yes, we're going to publish this. And here an artist comes in saying, I don't like that the first 4 pages are nothing but Steve Rogers just thinking about the fight he had last night. And they're sitting there going, well, this is a 22-page book, 20-page book. What do you want us to do? You want us to take out those 4 pages and make it 1 page? So what about the rest of those 3 pages? Now we don't have a 20-page book.
Right.
Now we've only got a 17-page book. What are you talking about? You are disrupting the game here. There's no way. And because of that, you can't really say, I cannot protest too loudly in a case like that. I am very much so, and I will go to my grave, you know, feeling that more is more. A lot of people say less is more, but I love the fact when something is dense. You read something like The Watchmen, and it requires you to be active. It requires you to be thinking. It requires you to be present in what you're reading. And I hate to say it so many, and I guess I can say it being a 30-year alumni.
Yeah, I feel like you've earned it. You've earned it.
There just isn't a whole lot of density anymore. I hate to harp on Alan Moore, and everybody out there, if you're getting sick of me talking about Alan Moore, I hate to say it, you're going to get even sicker because this guy was so good at what he was doing. I never read any of the Miracle Man stuff until later. And as I read the early stuff, a lot of that stuff was just contained to 7-page stories. But he managed to basically do in 7 pages what most people would do in 22 pages now. And that, to me, is a masterclass. Cool. If you can tell a story in 7 pages or whatever, because the ABC Warrior stuff was a lot like that. All of the British weekly stuff,
like 2000 AD,
2000 AD,
they were tight
because
stories.
They were serialized. Yeah, they just gave you a little bit every week or month or however long it came out because they had multiple stories. I'm rereading, I should say, the Rogue Trooper stuff.
Those are nice reproductions.
Very nice, with Dave Gibbons.
Yep.
And a guy who never got his flowers. If you look at that, it's a guy named Colin Wilson, amazing British artist who never made it over here. I think, unfortunately, he passed away early. But his stuff is so good. It was basically him and Gibbons doing the Rogue Trooper for a while. And he's a guy, unfortunately, never made it over here. But, man, just as good as Bolin, in my opinion, or Bolton, and all of those guys coming over. So that was a long way to say that, I don't know. The density, the density of it all. That just, there's such a lack of it that you don't see anymore. And every time I find something which is rare these days, I just hold on to it.
Well, you mentioned the cinematic. It made me think of how do you balance that, considering that you have made a name for yourself over the last decade or so doing comics that originate in movies and
Oh,
TVs.
yeah.
So where's that balance? How do you balance those two things?
Well, yes, you're right, for one. And of course, it was something I always, as a kid, sitting in junior high with my friend in English class, or maybe in the library or something, we're sitting there drawing the Millennium Falcon thinking, oh my God, one day, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. Of course, that's the holy grail at the time. If you're a fan of Star Trek, Star Wars, or any of those franchises, that was the thing to do that you wanted to do. And I never thought I'd get the opportunity. And it's ironic that now I probably will die in this business being known as the artist who did all of the movie, TV show franchises.
But how do you turn the movie? How do you differentiate those two things?
Right. I don't know. Actually, it's a different, because just like what we were talking about, movies are movies, comics are comics, novels are novels. You know, we can take Buffy, for example. Saying Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which wasn't a successful, basically, comic book. If you really look at the 7 seasons of Buffy, it was a serial, it was a soap opera, whatever you want to call it. It was basically that, where there was a continuity, but if you only came for one episode, you got what you came for.
There was a lot of Claremont in that show's DNA.
Oh, for sure. There's a lot of Marvel. Obviously, you know that Buffy is a template of Kitty Pryde growing up and all that stuff. But I always thought, Joss, there is something from the TV show that must come into the comics, or else we're not going to get those people who have never read a comic book, who love Buffy, to come in and start reading the comic book. And he was like, okay, well, show me what you do. And for the first couple of issues, well, certainly for that first arc, The Long Way Home, it was very much a learning experience between him and I, because I was very much a novice on Buffy. I had no real knowledge. I knew it from pop culture, but I didn't see a television show. It was everywhere. And of course, he'd already written Frey, so that he knew how to write comics. And I think he had finished the X-Men. He did that X-Men run.
Yeah, he did Astonishing. Yeah.
Astonishing X-Men. And he'd already done that. But again, these are different characters and nothing where he's taking his actual TV show and continuing it forward. So from there, we learned, and I swear to you, the best email, probably an email I got, he was like the best email I got, because I thought, here I am questioning the guy whose franchise this is that we're all playing around. And I'm telling him, no, I don't know if it's good to do it the way it was done. We should be doing it the way it kind of was on the TV show, but making it more look like the comic should look, or how you always wanted the show to look if you had all this money. If you didn't have if you had an unlimited budget, this is the way the comic should look. And after about the third script that he had sent in, he was always giving notes like, okay, make sure this is this, make sure this is that, and make sure this looks good, or this looks at that. And, he was very specific about what he did. And after about that third script, I guess he started seeing pages. He just stopped. It was just Buffy walks into the room. Whereas before, Buffy walks into the room, she has that look that she had in episode so-and-so of this. And she's putting up her fists the way she would if she's going to start a fight. After about issue 3 or so, he just basically let Buffy walks into the room. And I was like, Joss, what? Are you mad at me? Because you're not giving me as much description as you used to. And he's like, dude, you got it. I don't have to give you any more description. This is it. I am so happy I made this decision, because we didn't know each other beforehand. He's like, I just had a gut feeling about you. And looking at the Buffy stuff that I see now, I am so happy I made this decision, because I know she's in good hands. Whether or not because he knew he was going to be here for a few issues, let somebody, just like on the TV show, let somebody else write, and then come in. And he's like, I know you're in good hands. If you are the constant element here, I'm not worried. And I was like, oh my God, that's.
Contrast that with Mandalorian.
Now, the Mandalorian that was probably an easier gig, easier and harder. Because, an average episode was, 40, 50 minutes
about that,
or so?
Yeah.
And we had 30 pages to tell 40 minutes. The writer, I give so much credit to Rodney Barnes, who wrote and condensed and essentially gave you the essence of what every episode was, rather than, because we couldn't tell every single little thing as it happened. but he gave you everything you needed to understand and enjoy the story. And then it was just up to me. I guess some people would say yes, but it's also equally as hard to visually choose whatever those static images are to tell that story as we're moving forward. And yes, that is where my skills, my expertise, whatever it is as an artist come in and saying, I'm a storyteller. And this is, again, a long way around coming back to why storytelling is so important. I was given the script, and I can see very much where a novice would be so overwhelmed by looking at the words and saying, I've seen the show, but I'm seeing the words and I don't know how to translate the two. It was a lot easier for me, having already told stories at this point, to say, okay, because there were times where I would ask Rodney, hey, you're doing this in 2 panels, but I think you need another one because you need the character to take a breath here. You can't just go from here to here. They have to have some sort of succession. Or, man, this is a great action shot. You can do this in one splash and people will get it and we'll have that much more space to have something really cool looking. So doing that, and I think if you're a good writer, you don't have that ego about you. If somebody can tell something, if the artist can come in and tell it better, and I've had a lot of writers say that to me, if you can come in and do this better than what I've written, by all means, I want you to do that. Obviously, you have to clear it with them, but coming in there, you again, not hubris on my account, but you having a good writer and a good artist come in, you have something like what I think the Mandalorian ended up being.
Yeah, and when you in Mandalorian, what was really fascinating about that as a reader was it wasn't just a storyboarded version of the episode.
Correct.
I feel like that would have been easy to do, and a less experienced artist, I think, could have felt the need to default to that.
And Star Wars they have this website where you can have every reference you've ever thought of.
No kidding.
So you could, I hate to say this, but you could legit screen capture every part of whatever it is you're trying to tell. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, it looks like a screen capture of whatever it is you're doing.
So how do you guys go about, like, yes, that way it's framed on the episode is good. No, I think I'm going to change it for this. What is that process like?
I really, and I stuck to my guns because I did all of season 1 of Mandalorian. And I stuck to my guns saying, I'm going to tell this story. Like the first issue, I don't think I used the reference in the sense of what was the Mandalorian wearing or where is he or what are the characters around him? Yes. But I really tried to tell it as a comic book and saying, that was the show, now this is the comic book. And for that first issue, I kind of sneaked that process in. Nobody said anything about it, so I just kept it going. For the really important shots, I probably would have stayed with what the reference was. I'm trying to think of a really important shot. Okay, when, oh God, who's the little guy?
Little Grogu?
No, the one I have spoken.
Oh, yeah, just Nick Nolte.
Right, Nick Nolte, exactly. There's a point, and I think he dies in the second series. But when he dies, there's just this shot of him laying, and unfortunately, sad. I used the reference that the film had filmed for that because I thought this was such a stoic image, and it resonated with everybody. So everybody watching this or reading this will see that and go, okay, I know exactly what that is. And I think as a storyteller, that's what you want to do. You want to get the story across as quickly as possible. You don't want somebody to sit there. You would love it if somebody would just look at it in awe at the beautiful work that you've done.
Yeah.
But you don't want them to sit there and try to figure out what it is you're doing. Storytelling is paramount. If I have to say, I would love to do this cool image, but it doesn't gel with the way the story is going, I'm going to give up that really cool image.
Let's kill your darlings.
If servicing the story means you got to take out something cool, then yes, unfortunately, you have to kill that particular darling.
What you got next coming up?
What do I got next? Like I said, the Dungeons of Doom is something I'm doing right now. I'm also working with Mad Cave Studios, a smaller company, a really cool upstart.
They're a cool publisher.
Very much like the way Dark Horse was back in the 90s. They're sort of up and coming, but they've got a lot of heat behind them, and they've got some good stuff coming out. I'm doing something for them called Revolution 9, and it's basically their version of the Black Widow. and it's another mini series, but apparently it's an ongoing series of mini series because there was a mini series before, and I'm doing the second batch of mini series, and I'm doing that. I'm actually inking myself, which I never do unless it's a cover, and I'm doing that. So yeah, that, and then the Doom. There's some talk of maybe some Black Panther stuff coming up, but I can't say anything, yay or nay yet. So there's work. I just have to figure how to get it going and how to actually accept, because I'm one of those guys, since you're freelance, you never say no because you never know where the next gig is.
Yeah, it's feast or famine.
So if somebody offers me work, I'm always like, yeah, what do you need? What do you got? What are you doing? Yeah, what's the next thing? And sometimes you get overwhelmed, but I really try to manage it to a point where, okay, this week is this week is that. And I still do commissions and things and do drawings here and there. So it's tough. And then do cons, which
you're a busy man.
Not as busy as you would think, but it's consistent. I'm a consistent man. I will say that.
Well, it's done you well so far. Listen, I've been a fan of you since I first saw that Green Lantern cover. Getting to get to know you these last few years here with the store. You're
for sure
amazing artist. Even more amazing person. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Not at all. And I've admired what you've done to the store.
Thanks,
It's always been a thing of mine because I managed shops before I got into this business, and I always thought, God, when my career is done, I want to manage a comic. I would love to have my own little comic shop somewhere, and out in the outskirts, and make a poor but modest living,
sure.
And then having people come in every week and all that stuff. And so there's part of me when I come to places like this that I know people are doing it well and they're doing it right. That there's that twinge of jealousy, like, oh man, this is something I really wanted to do.
Well, hey man, when you're ready to retire and manage a shop, come talk to me. Thanks a lot, dude.
Thank you.
Man, you meet a lot of people in life who are cool. Lots of people are cool, but you don't meet many people who are Fonzie cool. People who just exude coolness in literally everything they do, but George he's one of them. If you told me he could make a jukebox play just by snapping his fingers, I'd be like, yeah, of course he can. Why wouldn't he be able to do that? But as cool as he is, George is even more of an awesome person. He's a fountain of knowledge. He's kind. He's considerate. He's just an all-around awesome dude, and I am in awe of everything he continues to accomplish in comics. I'm always excited to see what he's going to do next. Well, that about wraps up this episode of The Comic Shop Show. Make sure to follow the store online. We're pretty active on Instagram. @Infinite Realities Comics is where you can find us. You can visit our website at www.infiniterealitiescomics.com. Sign up for our newsletter. You can even come see us here at the shop. We're back next week, so if you like this episode, why not go ahead and subscribe? It's easy. You just push a button. All right, folks, it's been fun. Until next time, we'll see you at the comic shop.